My name is Thomas Elmore. I'm the chair of the Connecticut Historic Preservation Council, and I'm calling to order the September 7th, 2022 Historic Preservation Council meeting. With me this morning are the following council members: Beth Ackley, Vincenzia Aducie. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did.
All right, very good. Beth Burgess, Paul Butkus, Marguerite Carnell, Leah Glazer, Christine Nelson is not with us at the moment, Sarah Nelson, and Sarah Sportman. We have a quorum, so we'll get started. But before I kick into the meetings, I would like the council members to say a couple words about their backgrounds as a means of introduction to Vincenzia. And and then when we're done, we'll ask her to say a little bit about her, so we know what her background is, and I think it's just a good way for us to get started with a new member on the council. So I'll go first. I'll get started. Um, I'm a historical landscape architect. I have a small practice in Suffield, Connecticut, and I work across the Northeast. Because of the area of specialization, I tend to travel for my work. Beth Burgess.
Hi, Vincenzia. Beth Burgess. I am a collections person at the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center here in Hartford for a very long time. And I also sit on the South Windsor Historic District Commission and the Demolition Delay Committee. So I do a little bit of both preservation at both of those two things. But I'm really interested in the history of these sites and how we can connect to them, preserve them.
Beth Ackley.
Hi, everybody. Can you guys see me?
Yes.
I can't see anybody's videos. I can message this, but does anybody happen to know off the bat why that might be?
No, but maybe you want to, after you introduce yourself, just sign off and then sign back in.
Okay, I can try that. Thanks. Yeah. I'm Beth Ackley. I am a structural engineer, preservation structural engineer. I have a practice just east of Hartford in Columbia, Connecticut. And I also work all over the Northeast and have really enjoyed being on the council this last, I guess, year and a bit. So welcome, Vincenzia.
Thank you.
Paul Butkus.
Hi, welcome. I kind of straddle the world of architecture, landscape architecture, and I'm also involved as a board member and treasurer of the Meriden Historical Society. So I kind of combine both the practical design side as well as the historical activities.
Great. Marguerite.
Good morning. My name is Marguerite Carnell. I work for Archaeological and Historical Services based in Storrs, Connecticut. I'm an architectural historian and I work in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island primarily.
Leah.
I'm Leah Glazer. I'm a professor of history at Central Connecticut State University, where I coordinate the public history program. Been there for the last 16 years or so. And I teach historic preservation, work as a consultant sometimes. And a lot of my students are out there in the preservation world now, so.
Sarah Nelson.
Good morning and welcome, Vincenzia. So I'm Sarah Nelson. I'm an architect. My practice is in Branford, Connecticut, and for the last 26 years, we've been working in the field of historic preservation, everything from master plans for historic sites to detailed conservation studies. And I realize now that I am the longest serving member on this council, which means that I am sometimes the institutional memory. but I guess that goes with the gray hair I have now. But welcome, and I hope you enjoy this appointment as much as I have, because it's a wonderful way to learn about our state and wonderful colleagues to work with.
And Sarah Sportman.
Good morning. My name's Sarah Sportman. I'm the state archaeologist for Connecticut. My background before I took this position in 2020 was in cultural resources management archaeology. And now as state archaeologist, I'm based at the University of Connecticut, where I'm affiliated with the Connecticut State Museum of Natural History and the Anthropology Department. So welcome.
Thank you.
Great. And Vincenzia, that's everybody on the council. So would you introduce yourself to us, please?
Yes, I will. Hi, everyone. Very nice to meet all of you, and I am looking forward to working with everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Vincenzia Devsai. You can call me V. Just a bit about my background. I'm originally from Ghana, West Africa. I come from a construction family. My mom, my dad, my sisters are all in construction. Here in the United States, I'm a construction manager and a real estate developer. My company, Base Management, we're based in New Haven, and we have an office in New Haven as well as Bridgeport. And I'm very excited to be a part of this. I love historic buildings. I went to Savannah once and I said, oh, wow, this is like an amazing town full of these wonderful buildings that I just said, you know, it has to be preserved. So this opportunity to help to make sure that we can preserve these buildings is a great honor. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you, and thank you again.
Great. Well, welcome. All right, we'll get started with the meeting.
Hey, Tom, this is Jonathan. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
One more thing I wanted to relay is we are also being joined today by Andy Horowitz. Andy Horowitz is the newly appointed state historian for Connecticut, and he will be taking over Walt Woodward's spot on the council. I just was able to touch base with Andy a little bit this week and gave him some information, but he will be joining us for the October meeting, and we'll get him all up and running. But I did want to give Andy a chance to say hi to everyone as well. So we'll have another new member joining us in October as well.
Okay.
Can I just also share, I'm sorry, my house is being nominated, 104 Wilcox. So we got a letter with an invite to join the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a guest, I guess you could say.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jonathan, is Andy with us now? Does he want to say something, or should we wait until October?
He is with us. You may just want to say hello, and then we can circle back in October.
Okay.
But I wanted to give him the opportunity to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm here. I'm Andy Horowitz, and you'll hear more from me next month. But I'm really grateful for the privilege to be with you all and to get to know you better and to work with you. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. All right. The following is the Historic Preservation Council's format and review of public comment procedures. Given the online format of today's meeting, and for those of you who are visitors today, I want to review and explain our procedures. The order of the presentation. I will read each motion and ask for the motion to be moved and seconded. Staff will present the agenda item to the council. Council members will have an opportunity to ask questions. If asked upon by staff, a representative of the organization may offer statements or address council's questions. For members of the public who wish to speak to the agenda item, we ask that you identify yourself and your affiliation. After all questions have been addressed and statements made, a roll call vote will be taken. If members of the public have letters and/or written statements they wish to submit for the record, please email them to Jonathan Kinney. His email address is jonathan.kinney@ct.gov. The Historic Preservation Council takes statements from members of the public but does not respond to questions. Lastly, please only address the particular agenda item being addressed at that time. The following is the Historic Preservation Council's policy regarding conflict of interest. The Historic Preservation Council votes on matters which provide leadership, service, and economic benefit to property owners, consultants, local governments, and not-for-profit organizations. Given this responsibility and to maintain the highest professional standards in the discharge of our duties, it is important to maintain a strong code of ethics for all council members and department employees. In order to avoid possible violations of the Department of Economic and Community Development ethics statement, it is necessary for the council to be aware of any situations in which there is a real, potential, or apparent conflict of interest involving anyone here. A conflict of interest may occur when a public official's participation in agency matters results in personal financial gain. All council and staff have been provided a copy of the Department of Economic and Community Development Ethics Statement and governing state statutes. Having reviewed them and today's agenda, members of council and staff are now asked to disclose any affiliation with entities or projects that may create a conflict of interest as defined by agency policy and pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1-79 through 1-89, entitled Code of Ethics for Public Officials. Once disclosed, the member or staff may recuse themselves from that particular agenda item. Having read this statement, are there any council or staff members that would like to disclose a conflict of interest to any of the items on today's agenda? Okay, so we'll proceed then to the meeting minutes. Meeting minutes have been provided to council members in Dropbox. Are there any corrections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Marguerite, so moved.
Beth
Sarah
Burgess,
Nelson,
second.
second.
Oh, sorry.
All right. You know, being deaf in one ear, that phone's really bugging me. Can you mute your phone, whoever that is? Or your, the web page? And who made the second?
Two people, Beth Ackley and Sarah Nelson. So take your pick.
All right, we'll give it to Beth Ackley. All right. Take a roll call vote to approve the minutes. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
V, I'm going to ask you, I understand you're not going to vote, but I'm going to call your name and ask you to abstain, just so for officially, because you are an official member on the council. So, Via Duce?
Abstain.
All right. Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
I'll abstain since I wasn't present at that meeting.
All right. Marguerite Carnell? I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Is Christine Nelson with us? Okay. Sarah Nelson
Aye.
and Sarah Sport.
I was not at the meeting, so I will abstain.
Very good. Motion carries. Thank you. First item on the agenda is 5B1. Lockwood Matthews Mansion. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a Historic Restoration Fund grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Lockwood Matthews Mansion Museum of Norwalk. Project, the restoration of the original LeGrand Lockwood Mansion front entry door. Grant amount, $75,000. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
Sarah Nelson, so moved.
Marguerite, second.
Okay. And a discussion? Or
This is Erin Fink from the SHPO office. The Lockwood Matthews Mansion is requesting $75,000 for the proposed conservation and restoration of the original front door surround at the Lockwood Matthews Mansion. A comprehensive conditions assessment was done by David Scott Parker Architects, and the firm will be responsible for overseeing the project. Both Susan Schweitzer and David Scott Parker are both here to answer any questions that you may have. I've also put together the questions from council in the reviews from SurveyMonkey, and the answers that were given by the applicant as well. So I can read those if it's helpful to put them into the record.
Aaron, you lost me because I was reading what was on the screen. What did you ask?
Would you like me to read these comments and questions from the council to put them into the record?
Yes, please.
Okay, so for the Lockwood Matthews Mansion, Leah Glazer just wrote that this seems complete and well written. Beth Burgess also noted that this application seems complete. Marguerite Carnell did have a question. What color stain will be used and how was that color selected? If necessary, will any type of bleaching be permitted to achieve uniform wood color prior to staining? So the answer that I received from the architect is that the color of the stain will be applied. The color of stain that will be applied was determined based upon remnants of the original finish found protected beneath original mounts. No bleaching of wood will be necessary as all the wood has been found to be fairly consistent in tonality. Marguerite, did that answer your question? I can't see anybody, so hopefully.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, good. And the next question came from you, Tom. Did the infrastructure project go out to bid this past summer as expected? Why are there 3 of the architect project estimates that are all the same? And will the specifications be updated? This progress sheet is from April 2021. So I wasn't able to go over that with the applicant, but Susan, are you available to answer the first question?
That question would be probably best directed to David Scott Parker. The infrastructure project that you referred to has not yet gone out to bid. The mansion was very fortunate to receive additional funding over the spring and summer, and therefore the bid package is being prepared as we speak and is scheduled to be out to bid either later this month or early in October.
Great. Thank you.
The second 2 questions, will the specifications be updated? It looks like there are a couple of the same and the progress sheet was from 2021. David Parker, are you on the line?
I am here, and yes, the specifications will be updated accordingly. And then the other questions that you had forwarded to me, I submitted responses, and there will be additional detailed information added to the specifications as this goes out to bid.
Thank you. I did put all of your answers in the PowerPoint. It was Paul that asked these questions, so I can run through those now. And if you would like to add anything, just let me know. So it says the specifications for hardware and weather stripping appear to be generic, other than the brief mention of restoring the hinges. The project description mentions restoration and replication of bronze decorative elements, which isn't covered in the specs. The listed astragal weather stripping is an aluminum surface mounted style. And the current astragal, I'm probably saying this wrong, is molded wood. Is the intent to embed this new astragal into the existing or replicated wood? There are no details for this intervention. Hardware spec also calls for door closer, but no mention of a product. Perhaps this is a placeholder, but selection of an appropriate style is important, especially on a door of this type. Are professional fees allowed under this grant funding? They are included in the project cost. So I'll start with the last question because that's directed at our office. Project management and oversight is an eligible expense. Regarding the other questions, David Scott Parker wrote, any missing bronze decorative elements will be recreated in the following manner. Silicone molds will be made using existing elements. At least one bronze mount survives for each. Wax impressions will be taken for these molds. Bronze castings will then be done using the lost wax process. The 2 bronze heads on the upper door panels will be patinated to match their original finish. All other bronze elements originally were and will again be polished. Surviving original mounts will be cleaned using a non-ionic detergent polishing using a micro finishing compound, and then cleaned with acetone followed by application of an exterior lacquer. The original molded wood astragal will be preserved in place. Please disregard the note about an aluminum weather stripping. The note about a door closer was indeed a placeholder. And if a closer is to be installed, its specification will be reviewed with SHPO in advance.
So I have a question. As the landscape architect on the council, what is a wood astragal?
The astragal is where the pair of two wood doors meet, and it overlaps. It's mounted to the operable door, and it overlaps the other door to preclude air from escaping.
Thank you.
Those were the questions that I received, but if there's any council members that weren't able to submit questions, feel free to ask them.
Aaron, I have one more question, and I don't know if council has other questions, but I understand based on page 2 that there's a preservation restriction on this property project. Can you just explain a little bit about what that is and what it means and how it might impact our review?
Sure. So there is a preservation restriction placed on each property that's awarded a Historic Restoration Fund grant from our office. The length of time is determined by the amount of funding that they received. So if it's 5,000 to 20,000, it's a 5-year easement, and it just goes up incrementally from there. The longest easement that we have is a 20-year easement. Every time an organization receives funding, an easement will compound on itself. So if you already have a 20-year easement and you get another $200,000 project, your easement would then go to 40 years. And it's basically meant to offer advice and to be helpful to applicants and to owners of these historic properties, so that when they are planning any major work to the building after this grant award, they run it by our office and we make sure that they're doing right by the building. They're not removing any historic fabric, and they're doing everything that meets the Secretary of the Interior standards. So Julie Karmelik from our office is the easement coordinator, and whenever a project is being done on these buildings, they run the project by Julie, and she works with the applicant just to make sure that the changes will meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. So as far as council is concerned, you don't really need to, I guess, worry about it, because these applications will meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. We just like to note that there is an easement, so you know that our office has been involved in the past.
And am I correct that there are both architectural and archaeological easements, or is it just a preservation restriction as a global overview?
So for the Historic Restoration Fund grants, it's just the preservation restriction, but I think Kathy is on, or Corey, and they can talk about the archaeological aspect of it. If not, I can get back to you about that.
No, it's just I'm just curious because I don't understand it. That's why I'm curious. So, are there any other questions from council members? Not seeing any hands raised or hearing any questions, we'll take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
V. Aducier?
Aye.
Aye or abstain? Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Christine Nelson with us? Sarah Nelson? Jonathan, do you know if Sarah had to leave?
She was stepping out at 10, I believe she said.
Okay. Well, I will just.
And Leah as well.
Yeah, and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 5B2. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a Historic Restoration Fund grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Church of Christ Congregational in Norfolk. Project, restoration and reinstallation of the church's steeple. Grant amount of $200,000. May I have a motion to move this to the table for discussion?
Paul?
We'll give that to Paul. And a second?
Beth Burgess.
Okay, and Aaron.
Thank you. In 2019, a structural review and analysis found the steeple on the Church of Christ Congregational Church to be in significant disrepair from a structurally inadequate support structure and was removed because it was a potential safety threat. It has been in a cradle framing system next to the church since then and is sorely missed by the community. Working with GNCB, this grant would fund the restoration and reinstallation of the steeple and spire. And I will say that GNCB has done a schematic design. They are also providing construction drawings, plans and specs, and technical specifications and a scope of work as well. And so again, I put together some of the council's questions, and I believe Marie is on the line, as is a representative from GNCB to help with these questions as well. So Beth Burgess, again, just gave kudos to the applicant for a good application. Sorry. Marguerite Carnell asked if GNCB schematic plans were sufficient for approval of this grant. GNCB completed a conditions assessment and schematic designs drawings prior to this application. They are now working on structural engineering drawings, architectural drawings, and budgeting services. They will provide construction drawings, including plans, details, and technical specifications, outlining the scope of work required to address the areas outlined above. And they will also prepare a project manual to accompany the construction drawings as well. So I feel very confident that they will have all of the reports needed to do this project. Marguerite, did you have additional questions?
Well, I guess I'm just curious as to whether or not we should postpone approving this grant until we have those drawings in hand. That's a question for other council members.
So I just will say from a SHPO standpoint, in the past and, since I've been here, we do allow applicants to be approved for these applications before having the design drawings and construction drawings, because we do work with applicants to get them ready to go out to bid, and staff will review all their bid documents and drawings. But, I defer to council.
Thank you.
Any council members want to respond to Marguerite's question? Aaron's response? No? Okay.
I can just make a brief comment. I would love to just hear I think, technical answers to some of the other questions, and then maybe take up that question one more time at the end.
Okay, that sounds valid. All right, Aaron, would you continue?
Sure. So Paul mentioned that the project merits funding at the requested level. The amount of rot in the railings is concerning, and wondering at what point it makes sense to do more replacements than epoxy consolidation. Suggests that budget includes a large enough contingency amount to be able to address additional rot encountered when paint is stripped. Are existing columns tapered at all? If so, and they are being replaced with round steel, how much difference will there be? The extent of severely deteriorated wood will not be fully known until the paint is stripped. Severely rotted wood would be replaced with new wood in lieu of epoxy repair. The railing posts that are deteriorating at the bases will probably be replaced with new posts. So that's one of the specs. And then Beth followed up with some additional questions. Is full disassembly expected for this work? And the answer was restoration work on the steeple can primarily be achieved without disassembly in its current on grade cradle. Work within the clock room and for new base above the belfry floor clock roof level will be done in place in the remaining steeple structure. Her second question is, what is the intended design lifespan of the new building envelope protection, roofing, steel, paint, wood, paint? Would it be more cost effective over the long term to provide longer durability roofing materials than repairing and replacing shorter durability materials in the near term? So the answer was zinc coated copper roofing for steeple should be 80 to 100 years depending on environmental conditions. EPDM roofing for tower sections should last between 25 and 30 years, but could last longer because the roof is covered by the steeple. We are only patching and not sure when this roof was originally installed. Regardless, I would expect this roof should last another 15 plus years and is easily repaired when needed. New acrylic latex paint for the steeple typically should last between 15 and 20 years before it should be painted again. This should be budgeted maintenance item every 15 plus years. And then the third question, based on the fee breakdown, it appears that full architectural designs will be provided. Please confirm. Yes, we plan to provide construction documents, bidding service, and contract administration services. How do the designs intend to weather protect the steel? Are there any concerns with creating in-kind finish based on the base material? The intent is to enclose the steel columns with new wood or fiberglass column enclosures. So that's that question. And then where steel structural elements are being introduced, what is the approach to fastening architectural elements? Will mitigation for condensation at wood steel interface be considered? Are there any instances of copper or dissimilar flashing materials coming into contact with steel? There shouldn't be any condensation issues at the tower and as the tower and steeple are unheated. All flashing will be compatible with surrounding materials. And last question, will there be any exposed structural connections on the exterior? If so, what measures will be taken to conceal them? I do not foresee exposed structural steel connections. New steel ring base just above the belfry floor clock roof will be hot dipped, galvanized, and exposed, but not visible from the ground due to inset location and sight lines. I think that's all.
All right. Any other questions or follow-up from council members?
I have I guess a quick follow-up for discussion with the council. It sounds like, and I understand it better after hearing the answer, that the steel approach, the steel column approach, is essentially a concealed approach with a new architectural wrap around the steel. And it sounds like there's a consideration of an option for wood or fiberglass. I would love to just have a quick council discussion on that. I think, fiberglass doesn't always age very well, so it would be helpful to hear everybody's opinion one way or the other on that to guide Erin.
SHPO obviously would prefer wood as a historic material, but yeah, I'd love council's opinion.
Well, Beth, can you talk about what the issues are with aging fiberglass?
Well, it does, the finish doesn't always look quite the same as wood. It does, age in a way that it doesn't, require the same painting as wood does, which is one of the benefits I think that people like. But it does discolor and doesn't, will not be the same as the other wood elements will as it ages.
I know we've had a lot of discussion since I've been on council about how to treat the materials, especially on steeples, because they are so high and so difficult to get to. I wish Sarah was still with us, but she's not. So, Paul, do you have any thoughts
Yeah, I think there are a lot of the fiberglass column materials that are out there are intended to be painted. So I think there may be a way to address, it's not just raw fiberglass. That would be the intent anyway. And being a thin cladding around an internal steel column, you're probably not going to get a great quality of wood these days that'll last as long as and the concerns about the fiberglass. I think it's probably something that we've talked about before amongst the designers on the group, that especially for these hard to reach areas where you can't actually go up and touch them, there should be some consideration for some more durable materials being allowed.
And I think Paul's last statement, Aaron, is, it comes back to staff and SHPO. And again, I wish Sarah was here, but she's not. So I don't have any insight. I'm a ground guy, but I look up all the time and see peeling paint on church steeples. So
the great thing is that the staff is in the office on Wednesdays now, and we have staff meeting at 1. So I'll run it by staff and work with GNCB too.
Okay. Marguerite, hearing the response to Beth Ackley's questions, what's your level of comfort with your initial question?
I'm comfortable if Beth is as well with the level of detail that's been provided in the schematic design package. In regard to the fiberglass, so it sounds like the substitution of the material, fiberglass instead of wood, is not necessarily to cut down on painting as it's intended to be painted, if I understand this correctly, but that over time the fiberglass will hold up better, would not need to be repaired or replaced. Again, if I'm understanding that correctly. And if that is the case, if the fiberglass will be painted, then my follow-up question to Beth is there a question or concern about fiberglass literally aging? Will it shrink? Are there other issues that we need to be looking at with fiberglass as a substrate? And are there any other more durable modern materials that you would propose? I guess this question is to both Beth and Paul, in lieu of fiberglass, or is that the best option that we have if we're going to approve a modern material instead of wood?
I think that, fiberglass will age, is more durable, and it will, it doesn't seem to have, compatibility or shrinkage issues. I think in my mind, the biggest issue is if it's going to be painted, when the paint starts peeling, it's just going to look really different and out of place. If it's not maintained up there.
Aaron, I have a question for you to pass along to staff during your meeting.
Sure.
If staff approves the fiberglass, are you establishing a precedent?
I'm a little worried about that. It'll be interesting to talk about.
Okay. So I guess if there's no other questions, I'm going to bring it to a vote, but would you please next month or in a follow-up email, let us know what kind of decision you've made, because we're all going to be curious on that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is Marguerite.
Yeah.
Is it worth considering tabling this particular application until next month?
I have physically seen that steeple in its cradle. It needs work. And whether, if we postpone it a month, does that put them in the winter season? I just don't know what the time frame is. Aaron, do you know what the time frame is for bidding and starting work?
I think they want to start, very soon because, like you said, the winter's coming up. So I was wondering if you could do like a contingent approval upon, approve it upon hearing, an email from me with the answer to the fiberglass question, if that would be allowed. Because I think they have, everything else kind of figured out, or they're figuring it out. So I would hate to see it tabled you know, because of that. I'm worried about it.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. We've only talked about the fiberglass because that's what was presented as an option. Are there other options that should be considered?
Yeah, I think they just said fiberglass or wood, so I hadn't investigated. Beth, do you have recommendations, having worked on these types of projects?
Fiberglass and wood are, in my mind, the two options that I would consider too. And the one thing I don't know about fiberglass, and maybe that's part of the equation, is, whatever, whether it's wood or fiberglass, it has to be a custom product to look, to match what's there. And I haven't worked on with architectural fiberglass columns enough to know if they're as custom can be. It's as easy to custom make them as wood is. Not that wood is easy necessarily, but you know what I mean. So that might figure into the equation in your approval, that obviously you can't just grab an off-the-shelf fiberglass column of a design that's already been established. So maybe that's part of it. But I think, the with all of these things, and that was kind of where my questions were going, detailing of how all of the materials come together and the choice of the materials is the critical factor in durability. So, choosing a more durable wood, for example, that's more rot resistant, and creating detailing where the water just runs right. If it comes in, it runs right out, and it doesn't get dammed up by the column, and it doesn't, the wood doesn't get sucked up, say, by the end grain of the wood, and all of those things. So I don't know if that really answers your question. It's certainly not a black and white one.
Yeah, I see V has her hand up. V?
This is a separate question, but kind of tied to it, since we're talking about the material choices. What happens when the construction drawings are completed, because now it's at the schematic stage, and it turns out that it might cost more than 200,000? I'm just curious.
No, that's a valid question.
Sure. So our grants can only fund up to $200,000. So for any additional costs, the church would need to cover that.
All right, thank you.
And I also wondered if anybody from GNCB was on to talk to, about some of these materials or any investigative work they've done.
Marie has her hand up. Marie?
Oh, okay.
Yes, so I am the head of the steeple committee for the church, and we have raised well in excess of the 200,000. We're budgeting for more than the proposed amount that has been tentatively suggested. And we do also have Charles Brown from GNCB online. So he can speak to any of the issues, but, quite frankly, we will do whatever is required. If fiberglass is not an option, we'll work with the wood. But I do know we do have an architect on our committee who has also raised the issue about replacing with wood, because wood today is not the same as wood 200 years ago, and durability is an issue. So I'm not concerned about the funding. We will do whatever SHPO requires us to do to get this project going. And yes, we are definitely concerned about getting the project started, because winter is upon us, and that steeple is quite fragile right now, and I'd hate to see it go through another winter in the deteriorated state that it's in. So anybody else have any other questions?
Marie, I have a question, and maybe your consultant can also answer it. If you were to get started tomorrow, if the drawings were done and the bid was let and the contract was signed and you got started tomorrow, could you be done before winter? Could you be done before January 1st?
I think I need to put that to Charles, but I believe we could. But you know, it's probably a matter of a contractor's availability. I know that's kind of tough.
Yeah.
But it's not a matter of the funding. It would be, you know, putting the job out to bid and who's available and that whole process. Charles, do you have anything to say?
Yes, this is Charles Brown with GNCB Structural Engineers. We're working with Noise Road Architects. He's the architectural component of our team. We are in the process. We received the contract to go ahead and produce the construction documents and you know, a while back. So we are, that is underway, but we're not ready. If the question is, are we ready to go out to bid tomorrow? That's not going to be the case. We still have some time to formulate and complete the documents. The bidding climate right now is somewhat challenging because of the amount of work that's out there and the available contractors for this kind of work. You know, you have to have people that are certainly have a, you know, expertise in this kind of thing. So that is a little bit of an unknown, but I don't think realistically the whole project would be completed before the end of the year. But certainly it could be, you know, started or at least, you know, underway if we can get a contractor on board, let's say within, you know, the late fall time frame.
Charles, what's the lead time on special steel?
I mean, the steel we're talking about here probably is not that elaborate in terms of or exotic. So
okay.
Steel prices are coming down, which is good. The availability is increasing a little bit. So I don't think that would necessarily be a deal breaker or a long lead time item. Really, the time-consuming portion of this will be the architectural restoration of the steeple.
Yeah. Okay.
That is going to be weather dependent somewhat. So,
yeah.
You know, that certainly can be affected by cold weather.
Thank you, Charles. Marguerite, I saw your hand was up.
Yeah, a question for Charles regarding his thoughts on the recommendation for fiberglass here, please.
Well, that's a little bit out of my field, but certainly we want to, you know, the purpose of, or the concept of using the steel is to provide a structure that we know is going to perform well. I was anticipating you might be asking a question about that. I mean, we're working on several projects where we have exposed belfry columns of wood, and unfortunately they do not last over time because of their flexibility and the susceptibility to water, you know, deterioration. So the option to go with a steel structure and then clad it with an appropriate material to retain the historic value was chosen. Whether fiberglass is appropriate or whether, you know, wood, you know, that might need to be maintained more often, I'd have to defer that to our architectural consultants. But certainly the intent would be that from the ground, looking up from the ground, it would look the same as it currently, you know, as the original did.
Thank you.
Paul, I think I saw your hand. Yes, Paul, your hand is up.
Yes. For Charles, are the existing columns tapered in any way, or are they just a straight shaft?
The existing columns?
Correct.
I mean, I have to check the documents, but I can't tell you for sure. I think they're constant cross section.
Because one option, instead of putting a cladding, would be to make those steel tubes match the existing diameter, and they would just be painted with an appropriate paint system, and it kind of eliminates the issue of a wrapping.
That's possible, I suppose, but I only have to take a look at the particular details there, whether these columns have any kind of. I believe they are constant cross section, circular, but
so
we were intending to try to, you know, address the historic material properties of it by trying to at least wrap them in something that was appropriate to the time period.
And we get these questions a lot, and we have these discussions a lot. Marguerite, I see your hand is up.
Right. I just wanted to circle back with Beth Ackley and ask, you had mentioned, Beth, that really kind of the devil is in the details with these things. In the schematic design drawings that we have in front of us, what is your feeling? Do you feel comfortable approving them based on the level of detail that we have, since we don't have, DD level details and drawings?
So I think I would answer that by asking Aaron, and again, this might be kind of a hybrid thing. Would you hope to have or need to have council's review of the design document, or do you feel comfortable moving forward at your level technically? I mean, if you did want council's review, could we do kind of a hybrid approach where we did like a, an approval just sort of based on final comment on the details kind of thing, but a conceptual approval of the concept, and I don't know what the vehicle for that is, but that's a thought.
Yeah, I think that if you could do sort of a conditional approval so that they knew that this application was funded, but that they just needed to follow up on a couple of details, that would be great for me, because then I could, bring the details back to you, or if it's allowed for me to just email, a couple of people on the council that have that specialty. I'm not sure exactly what the precedent is because I haven't been here long enough, but I think I've seen contingent approvals in the past.
Yeah, I think that's fine. We would just have to come up with a motion for that would supersede the present motion. But Aaron, if you send something out to council, you need to send it to everybody.
Sounds good. Okay, I'll make sure I do that.
Yeah. So where are council members thinking with regard to approving the motion as it is, or conditional approval with a new motion?
This is Marguerite. I don't want to hold up this project, but I do not feel like we have enough information in front of us to vote on it unless we can craft some kind of a motion to make it conditional. But this is why the council exists, to approve these technical details, and it's difficult when we don't have them in front of us. But if we can craft such a motion, I'm willing to support it.
Okay.
Yeah. And just a question for Aaron on any HRF fund project. What is the statutory level of detail that is required? Because if we go down this route, we're basically saying we need to have bid documents in order for us to approve funding.
I believe it's design development.
So in the past, and when I was being trained, and I'd love if Mary's around, it was that we could, approve this based on schematic designs, and then the applicant would work with SHPO to review their design drawings and to review the bid documents before a contract was issued and they went out to bid. So I don't know if I'm bumbling there.
No, that's pretty much right. In the past, as long as council felt comfortable that they understood what the scope was, to a certain, it was not always, but very often part of the process that once the grantee was awarded, the next 90 days were committed to reviewing the final specs that were to go out to bid. And then that was what SHPO did. So if council is comfortable that they understand what the work is going to be enough to approve the grant, then staff would carry it through the rest of the way to design or construction.
Maybe the figure here is that the part that we don't know is what, say, the material on those columns are, and I think because it's a change of material from what it was historically, there's details that go along with it. And I think that might be unique to this project that might make it, might be sort of the cause of some of our questions. So I mean, it might not fit into the box of the typical.
Well, but let's build on that, Beth. If we do the contingent approval with a contingency, or approval with, a contingent approval, continue to work through the details, and we can see them next month. And because it doesn't sound like they're going to be done and ready to go out to bid in a month. Charles, am I wrong with that, or is that a good assumption?
That's probably, I'm just to double back on the, I just pulled up a photograph. These are the existing columns are solid timber, a 10-inch diameter, non-tapered timber column. So we either, if the option is to just have a steel column of the same size painted, that's an option, whether that's historically appropriate or not. Or we would have a slightly smaller steel column, circular steel column with a wrapping of some type that gives a more historic finish to it. So that's the answer. That just I wanted to make sure I didn't, want to go back and answer that question. We can probably, if the question is, we can supply probably, not too long a period of time, we can provide you with details about that particular element of it, if you think that's the only thing that's kind of holding up the contingency part of this.
Aaron, I need to ask a very frank question for you and the other staff members. How do you think staff is going to respond to the request for an alternative material? Because it really is going to open up a Pandora's box for next month or whenever the next round comes. And you can't put it back.
I don't know. I think we are. I don't know. I think let me get back to you after staff meeting.
So are the bid drawings going to be ready within a month, or can we table it to the next month?
Charles?
Well, I think it would probably be pressing it to try to get the bid documents ready within a month.
Would they be 90% so the engineers and architects on council can take a look at where they are?
I'd have to get back to you after I'd reviewed that with our architectural consultant, but I can certainly respond back in that. Certainly, it's not going to be more than, we will definitely be, we're into it now, so we're not hoping, putting this thing off for any period of times. But to have it ready for bid is probably two months out.
So Charles, let me ask you another question. If we were to table this for a month, you have a contract right now to continue with your drawings. You're hearing some apprehension from council members on the choice of materials or the selection of materials. But that's not going to slow you down.
No, there's certainly a reasonable amount of work we can do, without having to have that decision of how we're going to, finish off the columns at this point. So.
Okay. So can I ask council members, would you be inclined to table this for a month? Or would you be more inclined to approve or disapprove this application? And I'm looking at Marguerite, Beth Ackley, and Paul specifically, but the others as well.
It sounds to me like there's not a huge risk of tabling it for a month. And I think the piece that would be help, and the piece that would just sort of help us to understand is that coordination between the architecture and the structure, which it sounds like hasn't quite really jumped off into production yet. So I think that would give us a lot more information. And, it may be as that process starts, that sort of conceptual process of what material is this, irrespective of the comments here, that just the way it's all detailed might dictate that anyway. Like, for example, if we did go with like a solid steel, the steel was exposed, once once the design team started exploring that, it's tricky to make connections there, right? Like if you're like, it would be a straight steel piece, but then you've got all the trim, and how do you connect those? So that option might not be looked at. Maybe it would. And then again, with the way, the wood comes in, the wood beams come in at the top, does that work with fiberglass? Yes, no, maybe not. So there might be some conceptual design things where the design questions that might be answered just as the coordination happens between those two things. So I'm in favor of tabling it.
Okay. Marguerite, your thoughts?
I would be in favor of tabling it, but if pressed to vote on it one way or another, I would not vote in favor of the application because I don't feel that there is enough technical details provided.
Okay. Paul?
I guess there's no harm in waiting for the month. So even if it's not 100% complete for the drawings, to just answer these specific questions. But I think ultimately this project will be approved.
Right. I think so as well. And the other council members, V, I see you're in the center of my screen, so I'm going to ask you your thoughts. You're muted, V.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I agree with the other council members that just spoke. I think if we know that it's going to be approved, and looking at the technical details might be helpful. I also think that if it's pressed, they need to get going for commitment's sake. I'm also open to the conditioner. So I'll go for both.
Okay. Beth Burgess, your thoughts?
I second V's comments. I could go either way, contingent or table.
Okay. Leah? Oh, Leah's not here. Christine's not here. Sarah's not here. Sarah Sportman, our archaeologist. What are your thoughts? Is she here? All right. So hang on a
Sorry
second.
about that. I couldn't get my mute off.
That's okay.
I'm also fine with that.
Okay, so then I think, Aaron and Charles, I think what we're going to do is I'm going to ask the council for a motion to table this for a month to give the design team some time to put together their drawings to get them as far along as they can so that we can review them and approve things next month.
Okay, sounds good.
So who would like to make that motion? And this motion will supersede the one we have on the table, just so everybody understands. All right, Beth Ackley, would you please make the motion?
Okay, I'm rusty at this, so
You just keep it simple. That's fine.
okay, I make a motion to table the existing application until next month. That simple?
With the request to review additional.
With the request to review additional design documents, as far more developed in a more developed form than they are now.
All right, so that is the motion that's on the table. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Do you need a
Do you need a
second?
second?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, sorry. So that's the motion. Hang on a second. Let me make my notes here. Thank you, everybody. And a second?
Marguerite, second.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Then Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Via Duce? Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. And then the last one that's here is Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries for it to be tabled for next month. All right. And Aaron, can you please send us out a note with how your discussion with staff goes this afternoon, please?
You betcha.
All right,
will.
thank you. Tabled. Okay. Next item on the agenda is 5B3. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a Historic Restoration Fund grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Durham Public Library, project restoration of the exterior front stairs of the original 1901 Durham Public Library. Grant amount $182,700. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
So move, Paul.
And a second?
Beth Burgess.
Thank you. And Aaron?
Thank you. So this one is timely to follow the discussion we just had. Based on the comments and questions from council, I talked with the applicant and they are hoping for a conditional approval based on the understanding that the applicant will apply to the new survey and planning grant program for the preparation of architectural plans and specifications. I asked for the conditional approval because they do need a commitment that this project will move forward because it's in the town budget. But there are a lot of design and conceptual questions that need to be answered with additional planning done. And in between the time that they applied and this meeting, Mary's new program got up and running. So it's just a perfect fit in our eyes for this project. And sorry, I'm rambling. Go ahead, Tom.
No. So I'm confused. They want a conditional approval to go, I'll say to go back to an S&P to get the funding for the construction drawings to come back to the HRF?
I'm sorry. So a conditional approval that the HRF can go forward pending SHPO's review of the survey and planning grant, the results of the survey and planning grant. So they would still need to apply next month to the survey and planning grant program for Mary.
So, sorry, following the details. So the HRF is for construction. They're going to go back to the S&P for dollars for consultant drawings and specs.
Yes, so they already had the conditions assessment done and some schematic drawings, but they need to flesh those out and really get the details done.
Okay.
So I can show you some of the questions.
But before you get to that, Aaron, do all other council members understand what Aaron and I have just been talking about? Yes, no?
I think so. But I don't know how we can approve a grant if we don't have the design drawings and specs to review.
And that's the conditional part of it.
Yeah.
So Aaron, does it slow them down for us to just table this? I mean, looking at the drawings or the concept of the project, I can't imagine council will have a problem with it. But to table this for a month or two so that they can do what they want and then bring us the full-blown stuff would be much easier for council members to approve.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the questions I just have is if we, and I think I got my answer at this meeting, if we do need to always have the design, documents and bid documents at the time of the application. And so this has been really helpful going forward. I think, we'll make sure.
Yeah, I think as a designer, what is presented at a schematic or master plan level is significantly different than design development. So I would think if Marguerite, Beth Ackley, and Paul Burgess and Sarah Nelson all saw design development drawings, there's a lot of details that are flushed out at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We have difficulty with the schematic because the drawings are really generic. The specs are, almost non-existent. And so at least that's my sense on it. But I was the first survey member, so I didn't see what the other council members put for questions. So I think just for pro forma, I'd like to go back and then we can visit how we want to proceed, if that's okay.
Sure. Okay. So there's a comment about the preservation plan, but that will be, I think they're going to follow up on that. So one of them was, would it be better to have at least design development level drawings? Are there plans and specs? There was some additional, specific questions about, how the configuration is going to actually come together, the material, those sorts of things. And other design flaws. So once I saw all of those, I said, this is a good fit for the new survey and planning grant.
Okay. And was that it? Was what we just saw? Okay.
Yes.
So council members, let me ask you your thoughts and your feelings on the discussion to table this, to give the applicant time to go back to the S&P or go into the S&P for the larger non-matching funding for the drawings.
I mean, I feel that, from a conceptual level, this 100% follows something that conceptually, the type of project would fall within something we would typically approve. And it's just the actual approval is contingent on, looking at the details and we should probably square this with precedent, as Mary and Aaron were talking about. But there are certain instances where those details are just really, really important. And this one, I think the importance of these details is the durability. I mean, the last set of stairs that were put in didn't last for very long. So why didn't they last? We're the stewards of the state's money for this. So how do we ensure that not only is this in historic keeping with the structure, but that it lasts for a long time and it's a good investment. So so in this one, I do also feel that it's important for us to look at these details.
And Aaron, one of the things that Beth didn't say, but I'm hoping she was alluding to, is maintenance practices. And this set of stairs that's failed is old enough where we used to spread salt down versus the new product that's not salt based for ice melt. Whether that was the cause of it, I don't know, but maintenance practices go a long way.
Great. I'll mention that it would be helpful to have those defined. Okay.
Any other comments or questions from council members?
This is Marguerite. I agree with Beth and you, Tom, as well. Let's table this.
Paul, was that you I heard?
Yes, I just thought that this had less specificity as to what they were proposing than the previous project, and that it really merited getting a true plan of action to what they're going to do, because I didn't really have faith in the cost estimates based on a very, very schematic discussion as to what was going to be done, and options for phasing and how does that impact structural stability of the stairs going over with the staircase and doorway underneath and all of that. It definitely needs a little bit more grounding in what is really going to happen before we can kind of approve the funding for the actual construction, because it may be quite different.
Okay. Thanks, Paul.
I think going forward, this has been really helpful, and I'll make sure to, always have those design drawings and specs, kind of at the time of the application. And I think having Mary's grant now is going to make that a lot easier for applicants to.
Okay, I agree. Okay. Any other questions or comments from any council members? So then may I have a motion to table this? So let's talk this through. Aaron, if they're going to be applying for S&P funds, that'll come next month, you assume?
That's what we're hoping. Yep. Mary and I are going to schedule a phone call with them and kick that off.
So do you think a 3-month tabling is sufficient, or should we do a greater distance?
You know, I think somebody from Silver Petrocelli is on the call, and I wonder if they could give us a timeline of what their schedule's looking like for getting something like this taken care of.
That would be great. Thank you.
Christine, are they on by any chance?
No, they were not able to be on this call. And I'm afraid that I would not be able to make an estimate about the timing that they would need for this. I could certainly check with them after this meeting, but I don't have that info now.
Could we make a motion for 3 months and then just do another table it in 3 months if they weren't ready?
Yes. So again, I just want to talk that through. So Aaron, if they come in next month, how long does it take for staff to quote unquote approve the monies for the consultants to get started? And, you know, I like that suggestion of 3 months, but if these guys are working like gangbusters right now, could they be back in 2 months for the HRF, or is that just unrealistic?
I think 3 months would be realistic because they'll need to get their application in. Fortunately, because they already have a precedent from working with Silver Petrocelli, they can continue working with them and they won't need to do all the bidding that sometimes takes up a good chunk of time. So I think 3 months would be fair.
Okay. And if it's not, then we'll just bring it up and table it.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. So can I just see a wave of hands from council members? Is that okay if we do a tabling for 3 months? Okay, great. All right, who would like to make that motion?
I'll try to make that motion. So I'm going to make a motion to postpone approval or consideration rather of the Historic Restoration Fund grant for the Durham Public Library, the restoration of the exterior front stairs at 7 Maple Street in Durham for a period of 90 days. And I don't have a date of our of when that meeting would be, Tom. We should probably add that.
Let's not make it on a date.
Okay.
Versus, so we're in September, October, November, December 7th.
Still our December meeting?
Yep, December 7th.
Okay.
So the motion is to table the application until December 7th meeting. Okay, may I have a second?
Paul will second.
So the roll call vote will be on the motion to table the application until the December 7th meeting. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Via Ducier?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Cornell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Is Leah back?
Yeah, I'm back. Aye.
Christine Nelson, is she with us? No. Sarah Nelson is not. And Sarah Sportman?
Aye. Aye.
Very good. Motion carries to table this until the December 7th meeting. Next item on the agenda is 5B4. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a Historic Restoration Fund grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Weathersfield Historical Society, Holbert Durham House. Project, Phase 1 restoration of the foundation, porch, windows, and ADA accessible ramp. Grant amount of $200,000. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
Marguerite, so moved.
And a second?
Paul?
Thank you. And Aaron?
Thank you. So the Weathersfield Historical Society is requesting $200,000 for the basement slab and piers, an ADA ramp, porch repairs, modification of the existing bathroom, and window sash repairs. This project has been carefully planned with a condition assessment report funded by a survey and planning grant, as well as additional drawings. The total project cost is $417,000, and a capital campaign has been underway to fund the project. I believe several representatives from the project are on the line to answer questions, and I've also put together a few of them. Should I kick that off?
Yes, please.
Read those. Okay. All right. So Marguerite asked, the application narrative says that replacing window sills and headers is contingent on raising additional funds outside the scope of this grant. Concerned that the project budget does not include funding for new sills and headers, which are an integral part of the building envelope. This is especially concerning since the rest of the project funding is not in hand and WHS will need a bridge loan. Question for architects and engineers. Is good quality brownstone available? Are there any acceptable substitutes? The top 3 priorities for the house are the basement work, the porch, and the handicap access. If we have enough funding when the project has gone through the bid process, we will restore the sills and headers. If not, that work will be done as soon as funding is available. WHS plans to move our capital campaign in public phase this fall and meet our goal of $1 million by the spring. We are working with a capital campaign consultant. I will also be exploring CIF 2030 grants for this property. We are approaching the total restoration of the building in phases as our fundraising progresses. If we should configure this project in a different way, please let me know. Regarding the brownstone sills and headers, we are not planning on using the HRF grants or matching funds to pay for the restoration of these elements. We wanted to include it in this project phase because we have an expectation that we will have raised the necessary funds to do the work by the time the project starts. If not, it will be done as soon as we have the funding. And then Tom asked about, have the plans been approved by the town? If so, great. If not, how does the approval process and the time it will fit into their schedule? So the Weathersfield Historical District Commission will not need to approve the restoration of existing outdoor elements, with the exception of brownstone substitute should that be necessary, but will need to approve the addition of the handicap access ramp to the back of the building. Certificates of appropriateness issued by the HDC are valid for 6 months. Keeping the HRF timeline in mind, if we applied this far in advance for the COA, we would have to go through the meeting process again to renew it before we will be ready to do the work. It generally takes between 2 to 6 weeks to obtain a COA. Once we receive notification of funding, we will begin discussions with the HDC and obtain approval in time to carry out the work. And then a few more questions. Beth asked, will the existing exterior drainage system into which the leaders connect be evaluated as part of the construction process? The answer was this has not been considered as of yet, currently not in the scope of work. Is there currently any accommodation for vents in the round porch columns? What is the proposed treatment for the ventilation? No evidence of venting from base. Don't see why the tops couldn't be vented at the tops if this is recommended. Is there any indication of deterioration at the base of the round porch columns? And would raising them slightly on a pedestal help prevent future deterioration of them in the decking below? Image attached. For reference, square plinth blocks are used under the columns on the decking. They seem to be in good shape besides chipping paint. We were having them reused as is or replaced if necessary. We have a comprehensive landscape plan for the entire Keeney Hurlbut Dunham Deming Standish site from SLAM Collaborative that is part of another project. These drainage issues will be addressed within that. Archaeology will be a part of that project as well. The project we are addressing with this HSR grant has fairly limited disturbance of the soil, drilling 12-inch holes for footing, and I'm presently looking into an archaeological involvement with that. Sarah Sportman did mention that she wanted archaeology to be included, so that addresses that question. I think that might be it. Hold on one sec. And then these are additional questions which I wasn't able to have answered yet. So review grades adjacent to the rear of the building since it appears as though the existing grade at the bottom of the ramp is much higher or could be than proposed. Existing porch is just over 12 inches above grade, and it would be much better for the house if the ramp was able to rise up less than 30 inches, so only a handrail versus a full guardrail would be needed. This would have less impact on the historic structure. The stairs do drop down further as the grade slopes along the L, but this does not determine where the ramp meets grade at the opposite end of the porch. Structural repairs to the porch and basement are clearly needed and warrant funding. So I don't know if we want to pause and answer that, or if this answer about the comprehensive landscape plan and drainage issues sort of answers that, but I guess not so much about the grade.
Is Leah's comment the last comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
If we can go to the drawing that's attached to this, I don't know if you have that available. Basically, the issue with the ramp is that they're showing it going down to a level which I don't think is actually necessary, and showing a full guardrail along the ramp is just going to create a huge wall in front of this porch. I don't think that element has been, fully considered with the whole approach for the landscape, and it could be done in such a way that the ramp itself could pretty much disappear. Because when you see this building with a porch, wrapping around the entire structure, and then to put basically, a fence with pickets every 4 inches or 6 inches on center across the entire rear facade of the building, I think it's kind of a huge impact on the structure.
Hi, this is Dave Simons with QA&M Architecture. When we first did the ramp railings, we definitely looked at the elevation drop. I will say that at the edge of the stair, the grade is dropping down more. I think we're in the range of getting close to that threshold where we do need a guardrail on the stair. And so we continued that height all around as the rails between the stair and the ramp are continuous. But I think as we finalize the drawings, obviously these are, very close to being ready to go to bid. I will take another look at those elevations. And obviously, if we can lower the ramps, rails, and or the stair rails, we will do that.
But do you understand the point of the question is that 30 feet away on the corner of the building, your grade is really that 12 inches. The step down from the deck. It's not the full 30 inches where the stairs are at the L end of the ramp. So there has to be a solution that you can actually attach to the end of the porch rather than coming back to the first point and not having this incredibly huge structure across the entire rear of the building.
Paul, was that noise you?
I have a lot of noise outside. Some cars going through. I'm muting.
Thank you. So I have a question then for council and for Aaron. It goes back to the approval process from the town. If the town doesn't like the design that we approve, does the applicant need to come back to us? Aaron, council members, anybody have a thought there?
Tom, this is Beth Burgess. My understanding was that, and the way I've always gone through the process is you go the highest level of approval first, national, state, and then local. Generally, local follows the other two. Not always the case. I had a question back, sorry. This application is just for drainage, correct?
No.
It is beyond that?
It is for the foundation, porch, windows, and ADA ramp.
So it is for all of those things. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. It's it's pieces of a much bigger project.
Tom, this is Marguerite. It would be my understanding that if the Weathersfield HDC requires a substantial change in the design, that I think it would be SHPO's discretion whether to come back to us. But I'm not entirely sure about that. I have a question, concern with the application. So this grant is for the restoration of the foundation, porch, windows, and ADA ramp, and yet the restoration of the windows, headers and sills are not part of this, but they're part of the Windows system. So I'm concerned if we're approving restoration of the windows, but not the sills and the headers that surround them.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Beth, what's your insight on that?
I think that it would be a relatively simple thing. Might not happen in this moment here, but to identify, what the conceptual design or material would be for those headers and sills, just to sort of have with the application.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be stone. It's a matter of what stone.
Well, you could do a cast stone. I think Marguerite's concern was matching historic brownstone, which is not really being quarried very readily. And I know, Marguerite, you've certainly been involved in looking at.
We talked about brownstone before.
Yes. And cast stone, if it's done well, can be a good substitute, but it also sometimes isn't done well. So
right. And what about the timing of it? I mean, again, I'm kind of confused by the drawings in this package, because there's work alluded to in the drawings that we're not necessarily approving, if I'm understanding the drawings correctly. And I'm concerned about the timing too. Are the windows going to be restored and then the sills and headers later? I'm not quite sure how this is all happening.
I'm not going to speak for the Historic Society and Amy. She can speak up as well. But in the budget that was sent in, the top priority items are the basement work, which is structural in nature, the ADA component, which includes the ramp, and then also the repair of the porch, which is, if you saw those photos, those are not distorted photos. That is actually leaning over it like that. Those are the top priority items. And that work, per the budget or per the construction cost opinion that we did, maxes out the grant contribution at over $400,000. And is in the statement that Amy made that was in response to one of the questions, the window repair and the brownstone replacement for the sills and headers, those are secondary and would be funded assuming that the Historical Society has the funds or can come up with the funds. And that may be part of a GC package to do the top priority items or not, again, depending on if the funding's ready. To be honest, in our documents, we identified the elements that need repair or replacement, but it wasn't in our scope of work before we knew the final amount of money when we were ready to, that was available when we went to bid, whether or not we were going to fully detail this. So the question about the order of sash repair and how that happens with a brownstone header repair, that has not been fully thought out because we haven't done all the details on that yet, because we just didn't know if it was going to actually be a part of this bid package or not. And it's kind of, chicken before the egg. How much money do we have at the moment that we go out to bid with this?
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council members?
I have a quick question. I was the one that asked the question about the venting of the columns. But seeing the photo on screen, those might actually, are they solid or are they?
I'm pretty sure that those are hollow.
They're hollow, okay.
95% sure.
All right,
Based
all right.
on
So just
some of the exposed.
Yeah, so just something to take into consideration is ventilation on the inside of them. I don't know if the plinths are solid or built up, but that just can be one source of deteration and might be an improvement to take into consideration.
So Beth, are you saying that moisture gets in there and then it can't get out? Is that what you're asking or talking about the ventilation?
Yep, it can. Yep, whether from some kind of an actual leak or just a temperature differential and getting condensation. Those columns actually, seeing that photo, I mean, obviously the biggest issue is at the base and how, not so much a material thing, but a structural foundation issue below. But when wind-driven rain comes up onto porches and it seeps into the end grain of the bottoms of, it's just a classic way of deterioration. And maybe it's not an issue here, but just was wanting to raise the point.
Great, thank you. Any other council members? Questions? Yes, Marguerite.
I just wondered if the applicant had maybe considered using a handicap lift at the rear of the building rather than a long ramp. I know that there's a cost associated with it, but I'm just throwing that out as a potential option, given Paul's concern with the length of that ramp. And I also wonder what Paul would think of that. I have seen it successfully in at least one application where a porch railing screens the presence of a handicap lift, and it can avoid long ramps.
I think a lift is probably at the opposite end of the spectrum of where I was thinking. There's probably a landscape solution where you can actually raise the sidewalk to meet up to the end of the porch. And, depending on the length of that walk, you can get it possibly below 5% or at 5%, and you don't even need a railing at all. So I think a little bit further investigation there. It's like, where are people coming from? Where are they connecting to? And it's sort of, the section was drawn through the ramp looking outward and not towards the house. And so it kind of disguises the fact that, stacking it up against all that beautiful column porch work really is a distorted picture of what the reality is out there.
I will add
sure
to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's not just a matter of ramping up to the porch, but there is a 6-inch step from the porch up to the house. And so that ramp, the landing on the ramp is actually built over the existing porch level to actually come in flush with the house.
But I still think there's a little bit added looking at what's the bottom grade. There are no grades on the drawings to show what the elevation is at the corner of the porch in the house or at the end of the ramp. And it looks like it was just drawn to correspond with the end of the stair, which is likely lower than the existing grade of the walkway at the end of the ramp.
I think what we can do in our final documents is just do a little better providing additional. We have all the spot elevations. They don't necessarily all show up on these drawings at all the key points. So what we can do is fill those in. And again, I think if there's opportunity to either eliminate the guardrail by just a handrail, I think that would be a benefit to everyone, obviously, if we can do that. So it's something we will double check.
Because I think you'll need all of that in order to get your certificate of appropriateness from the Historic District Commission. So it's sort of my approval would be conditioned on receiving the local jurisdiction's approval that it's acceptable.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? Is council ready to take a roll call vote on this application?
Really quick, Paul, were you saying that you think this should be a contingent?
Pretty much. I mean, it's such a visual impact on how this building meets the ground that I think it needs that extra layer of design study first, and then just looking for the local approval that it is appropriate. I mean, it changes the whole appearance of the back of that building.
Could we, if it in fact falls that the often local commissions consider the review of a state comment review, whatever we do, say, could we then just ask for some additional information and review this again rather than throwing it back to be contingent on a local review?
I'm not sure what the rat mechanism is. It's sort of like the other thing. If it comes back to staff and staff can report back to us, I think that's probably fine. I think it shouldn't hold up the rest of the work, which is very much needed.
Right. Marguerite, I don't know if your question or comment is part of this conversation.
Yes, I do have a question, and I'm trying to answer it myself here, and I don't have the information up yet. So generally, historic district commissions, their purview is limited by what is seen from the street, and I just don't have a sense from the drawings how visible this ramp is from the street. Is it on a corner lot that it's visible?
It's not on a corner.
Amy, we can't hear you.
You're very faint. Maybe there's just a volume thing.
I think that, well, I'll check.
Can you hear me now?
No.
You're still quiet. We did hear you say that it's not on a corner lot.
It's not. There's a large lawn to the south, and it's visible to people that are on that lawn enjoying programming that we have there. But it is not visible from the street.
Okay.
So, council members, your thoughts on approving the application as it is? Marguerite, is your hand still up, or do you have another question?
Yeah, I'll take it down, but actually, in answer to your question here, I would recommend tabling this one too, so we have a chance to look at a few more of the details, at least on the ramp, to satisfy Paul's concern.
Yeah, this bottom image is like the key.
So let me ask council a question. We have what I would say are significant structural deficiencies. And if we were to approve this, they could address those. I understand what Paul's concern is. I don't know what the structural stability of the structure is. Does 30 days make a difference? I don't know. So I guess I'm looking for some help from council members. Aaron, do you have any thoughts?
I think, I would be fine following up and working with the architects for the next 30 days. I just defer to Amy and Bruce and the rest of the people on the call, how urgent is this? You're going to need to get that HDC approval for the rest of the work anyways. It's up to you.
I hope you can hear me. We certainly want to have the best looking ramp and the least impact to the back of the building as possible. So we will certainly look into every possible way we can make the best solution for that. We are very concerned about the stability of this porch. We have it roped off so people can't walk on it. We have a lot of concern, and we would really love to be able to start the process to get that structural work addressed simultaneously while we're refining that plan for the ramp.
Paul and Beth, what are your thoughts, and I guess Marguerite, your thoughts on the detailing for the foundation work and the porch work?
I think all of that stuff was fine. It's mainly this change the exterior that is the big issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm inclined to ask for a vote on approving the application, and Aaron, putting some burden on you to follow up on the ramp with the applicant and staff.
Happy to do that.
Paul, would you be okay with that?
Sure, and I'm happy to help out with staff review if desired.
Okay. Marguerite, Beth, are you guys okay with that? And the other council members? Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Is anybody not okay with that? All right, hearing none, let's take a vote to approve the application with staff following through on the ramp and the detailing for the ramp. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
V. Ducey?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
And Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Very good, motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Next item on the agenda is 5B5. The Historic Preservation Council votes to award a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. Applicant, Full Gospel Interdenominational Church. Project, consulting services of a CFR qualified architect to develop bid level plans and specifications for the Full Gospel Interdenominational Church, dated 1904. Located at 745 Main Street in Manchester. Grant amount of $24,250. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
Marguerite, so moved.
And a second?
Beth Burgess.
Okay. All right, Mary.
Great, thank you. For new members, I'm Mary Dunn. I'm also with SHPO staff. Staff does recommend approval of this application. As many of you, as we discussed at the last meeting, we've implemented a new policy to some of our survey and planning grants, and that is that we are waiving the match and increasing the cap on applications for architectural plans and specifications for projects that have already been through the process of getting a condition assessment. So the applicant is already working with a qualified architect, and the budget for the application is solid, so to, for lack of a better word. So that is the case with with Full Gospel Interdenominational Church. They have a completed condition assessment. They want to move forward with an HRF application, but when Aaron and I reviewed the condition assessment, we realized they really needed more information, and the condition assessment was included in the application. We just needed, more specifications. So, they are taking advantage of this new policy grant policy, and plan to apply, depending on how quickly they can get the plans done, for the November or probably February HRF agenda. I don't think Reverend Sal Mancini is here, but I would be happy to answer any questions or concerns that I can.
Council members, questions, comments, concerns?
I just have a comment that I'm really excited to see, a sort of much more automatic flow between an assessment into drawings and specs, especially for something like this where, the specification for mortar type is so important to, the durability of the structure and things like that. So good job, Mary. Exciting.
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, the condition assessment talks about the appropriate type of mortar, but they don't specify. So that's exactly, yeah. So great. Yeah.
Mary, I have a couple of questions with regard to the draft report, which I thought was quite thorough, but it says it's a draft report. Is there a final report, and were there any significant changes?
There is a final. There were no significant changes, and the draft was just, I'm sorry, what I had on hand to put in the application. But yeah, no, it's final. They've been completed.
And then my second question is, this application is for the parapet walls only, correct?
No, it's for the items in the condition assessment that were kind of deemed critical. So that does include the floor structure and the roof, and I believe some electrical and plumbing. But the main issue, especially from the perspective of the applicant, is the parapet. That's
so
not just critical. That's really.
So I'm confused. In there I saw, and I didn't write down the page number, I apologize. It says they have a $3.6 million total estimate budget. They're doing these drawings for under $50,000 for $3.6 million worth of work?
No, and I did not include the proposal of because I didn't want to violate any proprietary, I don't know. I just didn't want to include the actual proposal, but the dollar figure they're working with is the critical scope, which is more like 558,000, which is a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's I'm not an architect or a cost estimator. I think that's a little bit low, but that's the solid proposal. So that's what we put in the and that's from design development through bid level. It doesn't include the bid period or so.
Right. Okay. All right. Thanks for clarifying that for me. Any other questions from council members? No? All right. Seeing none, take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Ackley?
Aye. Sorry, it took me a second.
Via Dessier?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
Leah Glazer? I'm sorry, I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
And Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 5B6. The Historic Preservation Council votes to award a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant. upon receipt of a grant administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. Applicant, Stonington Village Improvement Association. Project, preservation plan for James Merrill House, dated 1901, located at 107 Water Street in Stonington. Grant amount $9,400. May I have a motion to approve, may I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
So moved, Beth Burgess.
And a second?
Paul?
Thank you. Okay, Mary?
Okay, so staff recommends approval of this application as well. We're really happy that SVIA came to us because they'd completed this CAP assessment, which often focuses on collections management, but obviously, the collection is housed in a National Historic Landmark building, so we were pleased that the CAP also included recommendations for addressing the building envelope as well, interior and exterior. And in the past, and I know we have at least one museum professional on the council now, but in the past, it's always been there's sometimes been a bit of a balancing act between protecting the collections and the building, and I won't say that they're at odds, but sometimes something you do with the building might affect the collection, either in a positive or a negative way, or necessitate, micro environments, that might protect the collection and still do what you want with the building. In any case, this grant is to move forward, not with a condition assessment, but sort of a master plan to sort of implement what's been recommended in the collection, the CAP. And SHPO's just happy to be part of it because, we can just be part of that balancing act. Cynthia Elliott is here with Stonington Village Improvement Association, I think, / James Merrill House, who can, I hope, answer any questions that I can't.
Council members, any questions, comments? Beth?
Yes, thank you. Mary, you hit the nail on the head. That was my question. I was hoping that the master plan would, have a discussion about the building envelope and preserving that, but also for what purpose? What is the use of this building in the next, 50 years per se, if we are looking forward that much? Are we designing an HVAC, climate control system, an environment to support collections, or are we? And is that sustainable for the Stonington group financially? So that discussion largely about the building use may often change environmental discussion as well.
I'm happy to address that.
Sure, go ahead, Cynthia.
The use of the building, first of all, the ground floor has commercial tenants, the second floor has residential tenants, and the third and fourth floors are the original Merrill apartment, and those are used by a writer in residence program year round. We've had this program going for 27 years now, and we're up to about 100 writers so far. They come one at a time, and they live in the David Jackson apartment, which is next door on the third floor to the Merrill apartment, and they have free access to the Merrill apartment to do their work. And one of the unique aspects of this program is that they are surrounded by Merrill's possessions, his artwork, his furnishings, his furniture, his books, and his records. And that's a very special and unique experience for those writers. We have already been doing some of the preservation and conservation work. A few years ago, we restored all the windows in the building, so they're all weather tight and they're double paned and they've got UV resistant film on them. We also installed climate control throughout the building. We have mini splits in most of the rooms in all of the building. We have also done conservation on all of the books, and it's something like 4,000 or 5,000 books that have been wrapped in library quality plastic. And so when we commissioned the CAP report, which is 5 years ago, they had some recommendations, such as, in 4 to 6 years, you're going to need to replace the roof. Well, we're now at the point where we can say, okay, it's been 5 years, and now we need to know exactly what we need to do next. We need a master plan with timeline and costing, so that we can plan out the next, say, 3 or 4 years. So that's the purpose of this grant, is to create that master plan based on the CAP report and based on what we've already accomplished.
That sounds perfect. I'm really grateful to hear all the work that you've already done to the building and the spaces. Wonderful.
Anyone else? Council members? No? Not seeing any other hands up. We'll take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Eckley?
Aye.
Via Ducier?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
And Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you all very much.
Next item on the agenda is 5B7. The Historic Preservation Council votes to award a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Torrington Historic Preservation Trust. Project, consulting services of a CFR qualified architect to prepare plans and specifications for the restoration of Ski's Diner, circa 1930, located at 69 Travis Street in Torrington, Connecticut. Grant amount $20,000. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
Marguerite, so moved.
And a second?
Paul, second.
Thank you. And go ahead, Mary.
Okay, thank you. So staff does recommend approval of this application. We have been, in a bit of a long conversation with Torrington Historic Preservation Trust. We just want to make sure that they have an end use in mind, which they do. They are solidly behind the use of putting it back in place as a diner. As you read from the application, they are trying to secure an appropriate place to situate the diner. And so even outside of all that planning, architectural plans and specifications for the restoration of the diner itself, we think, can stand alone, regardless of what the future location of the diner might be. So we do think this is the appropriate next step for the trust to take in regard to the disposition of the diner. Mark McCarron is here, maybe Ed Cook from the trust.
Yes, I am.
Okay, great, to answer any questions that I can't.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Council members, questions, comments?
Just an odd question for Mary. Since this is a structure that's going to be located in a different spot at some point in the future, is there some specific language that you have to put in for the preservation easement that it needs to stay in Torrington and needs, can't leave the state of Connecticut, something like that?
Yes, and under this grant, there is no easement required, but if they move forward to HRF, we do have language that pertains to, I guess this isn't really rolling stock, but, we have several easements on vessels in Mystic, ships that actually leave port sometimes and come back. And so we do, I don't have that language off the top of my head, but we do have a language template to address the fact that that the resource may not always be in the same spot it was when it was actually restored. So long answer short, yes. Yeah, we have that covered.
Anyone else? Questions? So, Mary, I have a couple simple questions for you. So this grant is for the diner specific. It's not for that potential site that was alluded to and making that connection between the diner and the building.
Correct. At this point, it's simply for the diner, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but the diner itself, as they stated in the application, there is unfortunately a hole that would be used to provide the conduit between a building. But at this point, and probably under HRF, anything that needs to be done to the ancillary building would not be eligible. I mean, unless it was also, well, maybe unless it was also listed and also owned by the trust. So that remains to be seen, but this grant is just for the diner.
Okay.
Can I add something here? I would guess I would like to, or the trust would like to know if that deteriorated area at the back of the diner, the hole in the back of the diner, as Mary referred to it, would be an appropriate spot to make a connection to another structure. So I think it's appropriate that we evaluate that while we're developing plans and specs for the restoration of the diner itself.
Paul and Beth Ackley, I'm going to defer to you guys. Again, I'm a landscape architect. So go ahead, guys.
Well, I guess there's always a structural component to an opening. So, looking at it from that lens, you would probably need some kind of a lintel or header at the top. Is there depth, room, head height to do that appropriately? Is there already something there? That doesn't necessarily speak to the actual location, but that's something you'd need to consider. And then, it certainly seems like from a building envelope perspective, an opportunity to kind of clean up the sides of it and reuse something rather than investing in restoring that on the outside. So it seems practical to me.
Yeah, it's definitely worth considering. It all comes down to the details and how big does that opening need to be, and for what the purpose of the connection is and code widths and all of that kind of stuff. But definitely worth keeping in the mix of the analysis.
Mark, and it also may have a lot to do with the building that you ultimately are trying to connect it to and the space requirements to rotate the diner to fit the space and fit that present opening. So, that was kind of why I was asking the question about diner specific and or diner and building. But I think it's a great little diner. So.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from council members? V, do you have any thoughts or insight as a builder on this?
So this is, let's say, phase one, and the next step is to move the diner somewhere else. Is that what the intention is? Okay.
That's correct. You're right. Restore the diner and then move it to a spot where it can be put back into service, serving food.
I see. Okay. Not at the moment, but I'll think of it and we'll give some input.
All right. Well, maybe they'll be back and they'll find a fantastic site that's also listed.
It looks like it was a pretty active diner. I looked it up, years ago. So hopefully we can get it restored back to its original condition.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other comments or questions from council members? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Via Ducier?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
And Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Good luck, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 5B8. The Historic Preservation Council votes to award a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, City of New London. Project, consulting services of a CFR qualified historian/architectural historian team to prepare a historic resources inventory of Ocean Avenue area in New London, Connecticut. Grant amount $29,865. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
Paul, so moved.
And a second?
Great.
I'm sorry, Marguerite?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mary.
Great. So staff recommends approval of this application. This does fall under the General Historic Resources Inventory grant, so there's no match required. This is an area of town, which you saw from the application, that is that's been neglected, that they want to kind of assess and see what's down there. I don't think anybody from the City of New London is on the call, Tom Bombria or Mary Beth Baker, but I can try to answer any questions or concerns that you have.
Mary, Tom Bombria is here.
Oh, great. Okay.
Good. Mary, quick question. You said this area was neglected. Neglected as far as having these assessments done.
Yes, I didn't mean, yeah,
Okay.
that's what I meant.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. Any questions or comments from council members?
Tom, just one, my usual spiel for advocating that the municipality considers seriously if the resources inventory recommends creating a district. That would be a great next step. So I just wanted to encourage them as much as we can to kind of follow through, because the worst thing is just to have the resources inventory done and then have it sit on a shelf and never take any further action. But we'd like to make things available to the homeowners in these areas, be able to take care of them for the future.
Mary, do you know if there's any discussion with regard to that?
Well, that's one of the components of an historic resources inventory is recommendations. Generally for the National Register, they don't really investigate state or local districts, but there are required considerations and recommendations for National Register districts and properties if any appear eligible. I will say that this particular type of report is one that is well used. It's not like the kind that just kind of sits on the shelf. It is just a basic information gathering tool to help the town at least be aware of what could be significant or what is significant. But sometimes it can cause confusion to homeowners. They wonder, well, what does it mean to be on the inventory? There really aren't any incentives or any restrictions associated with it, but it is of great value to a municipality, especially when they're doing their plans of conservation and development and just looking to see what the next steps might be in their preservation plans.
Mary, I have a follow-up question to that. Do these types of inventories have sort of a top-line analysis of sort of the pattern of the findings from the inventory?
Yes, I mean there's a methodology, and then also in addition to just the inventory forms, there are other analyses like architectural patterns of development over the history of the town, and then which include architectural development as well as history. So it's also valuable in that respect, especially when they're geographically based.
Yep, awesome, thanks.
I'll just add that sometimes when the confusion comes in is that either a property owner thinks that they have some resources available to them because they were listed. And then conversely, there are instances where a municipality has gone through, a building is in the historic resources inventory, but if they decide that they have a better use for the property, they don't care that it's in the resources inventory, unless they say, oh, if this other building is in the resources inventory, we can get it listed and get money for our purposes. So I just like to see, kind of a willingness to kind of take the findings of these resources inventory and take it to the next level if possible.
Sure, and we do not really just encourage, but require public engagement, so that people know what the inventory means and they get to see why their house might be listed. But I will also say that another important thing about this tool is that you've all seen everybody rallying around this building that somebody wants to tear down, and if it's not identified in any way, even just on the inventory, it's hard to make a case for why you feel it's important. So, the first answer back from the developer or even the town can be, well, if it's so important, why hasn't anybody, identified it? So that's another important thing about this particular tool, is just it kind of puts it on the radar for the town. But Paul, definitely a springboard to connecting property owners with incentives, whether they be grants or tax credits. So yeah, it's a good point.
Just one last question. Does SHPO follow up after the report is or the inventory is done and offer like an information section for property owners to say, okay, you may be listed in this inventory. If you would like to take on yourself to get your particular building listed, that would be a great follow-on whenever these things are done, to kind of like swoop in while everything's fresh in everybody's mind and try to get people excited about it. So exactly. if it's not a district or a wider effort, that you kind of are boots on the ground saying, let's encourage people to kind of take their next step.
Nope, that's exactly right. Is part of the public meeting. I mean, there's not a public meeting required as there is for, say, National Register or local, but we ask the applicants to have the consultant factor in a public meeting. And part of that public meeting is someone from SHPO, usually me, maybe Aaron, coming and telling people what the implications could be. What is a survey, but then what benefits are there to possibly designating a district or your own property. So yes, that's a component of the public meeting, definitely.
Great. Marguerite?
Yes, I'm really happy to support this grant application, especially since, as the application noted, that there was a survey that was started in the 1980s but never completed, which raises the question for me, how relevant is that information, and what kind of resources does the city have in terms of previous research? I ask all of this because it seems like a pretty ambitious project given for the budget. So I just want to make sure that the expectations are clear and that there's resources that the architectural historian could draw on to produce a report that is as comprehensive as is expected.
Yeah, no, you're correct. Jenny and I actually had a talk about whether the budget was realistic or not realistic, but enough. And it is, because there is substantial information already kind of gathered for the consultant to use. Now, granted, they still need to rely on the consultant to kind of whip things into shape and solidify. And I mean, the town might have its idea of what it wants to have inventoried, but then it's the consultant's job to really make determinations. But I think because of the information that's already available and the volunteers that are there to point the consultant in the right direction, this budget is it's a little shy. I mean, a couple thousand would help them for sure, and we might recommend that they, even though it's a non-match, that they maybe kick in, especially depending on what kind of bids they get. But no, the point well taken.
Yeah, I recommend that too. 2 days for field work for 150 resources is pretty ambitious, whether there are, other groundwork that's been done, because it's the job of the architectural historian to not only to take the photographs, but actually really look at the building and, take detailed notes. And so I think adding, having the applicant have a little extra money available would be really valuable for producing a quality product.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think, because all of these potential resources are in one area as opposed to being, in this highly rural place. I mean, it's a little bit more doable, but again, we will encourage the applicant to kick in, a couple thousand more just to make sure that they get a good, as you say, quality product for sure.
Mary, building on Marguerite's question there, does this inventory include outbuildings?
Well, it should, yes. If there's there's an early 20th century house in a suburban neighborhood and it has an original garage, that would definitely, we would expect that to be included. In a survey that's especially important, like in local districts, we need to make sure that those resources are identified so that they can potentially have the same protection or incentives.
I was asking because, I'm going back to the barn here in Suffield on a recent discussions that we've had. So, okay. Any other questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Via Ducier?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda, we have 2 State Register of Historic Place nominations. And the first one is 6B1. The Historic Preservation Council votes to list the Joseph and Lydia Lane farmstead located at 126 Snore Road. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Killingworth to the State Register of Historic Places. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
Marguerite, so moved.
Beth Burgess, second.
Just a second. Okay. All right. Is Jenny doing the presentation?
Nope, it's Marina.
Oh, hi, Marina.
Hi, Tom. How are you? Good morning, members of the council and guests. Thank you so much for your patience. Staff recommends approval of listing of the Joseph and Lydia Lane farmstead located at 126 Schnorr Road, Killingworth, under Criterion 1 at the local level in the area of settlement associated with the development of Killingworth through the Lane family, as well as under agriculture as an intact example of an 18th century farmstead that includes the majority of its original acreage and foundations of agricultural buildings built for the working farm. The remains of the axe handle factory on the property are eligible under Criterion 3 for their potential to yield information important to 19th century tool manufacturing. There have been alterations to the property, primarily the house, but they are sympathetic to the historic materials. The property maintains its integrity of location, setting, majority of design, and workmanship and feeling, which is augmented by the presence of the associated outbuildings, features, and fields. Dr. Thomas Lenz, author, owner, and Killingworth town historian, is here to help me answer any questions you may have.
I have a question, Marina.
Yes, Beth.
Do you have a feeling that some of the architectural elements seem earlier than the late 1700s date, like the brick oven in the back of the main firebox and the overhang on the gable ends? I don't know if there's any, I didn't know if you have any thoughts on that, or if the, where the date, if we know where the date of the building comes from.
Sure. So, so based on the information through the nomination, and I'll let Tom clarify, as the owner and the town historian, but based on the deed research, is there was evidence of when the land transaction passed to the Lane family, there was a mention of a structure, and so this was the first mention of the structure, and so that is where really kind of we could get close to that approximation date. But Mr. Lenz, you may have a better idea of that, especially since you're so well acquainted with the building.
Yeah. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, we put the date of 1759 on the house because it's pretty certain it was there then. There was reference to it being a farm in 1725, but I couldn't find any reference in deeds or records to there being a building. So being conservative, I stuck with the 1759 date. But you're quite right that there are some earlier features there. But I just can't prove that the house is earlier. And most people seem to date their houses earlier than they really are. And I didn't want to be in that situation.
So maybe the question then for Marina is when we're unsure about the date, how do we reflect that in a nomination?
So if there are components, really what we're looking at when we're talking about significance is we're talking about that period of significance. So even if there may be components of an earlier structure that was incorporated into a new structure, our period of significance really reflects what the extant historic fabric is. And in this case, when we have the house, we're looking more towards that mid 18th century where we have that form and we have the documentation. And really that's where we're talking about, because that's where it passes into the Lane family. And that's really where we can trace the evolution of the farm.
Yes.
Marina, this is Marguerite. I just wonder whether we could clarify a little bit of that in the language. So on page 5, the summary description, it says that the house was built in 1759. But what if it said by 1959 or something like that, just so that
Yeah, I think that's actually a good I think that's a good suggestion where basically, we can even clarify it by saying there are features that are indicative of an earlier structure. However, based on deed research, we can confirm that the property was conveyed with a structure at this date. I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's good.
I think that's good as well, because that'll help the next researcher say, oh, here's an unknown. Let me dig into this.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's do some dendrochronology.
Right.
Yeah, so many lay people, when they are confronted with a National Register nomination, they'll take it for gospel. If it says it was built in 1759, they're going to believe that. But if there's, a little bit of explanation, that's all helpful to include. I just wanted to say I was really pleased with the quality of this nomination. It's first-class work, really, really well done. I just have a minor point. It's very minor, but I thought it's so good. We might as well make it perfect, or just about perfect here. And that is on pages 3 and 4 of the nomination. At the top, the name of the property is given as the Joseph Lane House, and elsewhere it's referred to as the Joseph and Lydia Lane Homestead. And I just wondered if we might want to make that consistent.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah, and we should keep obviously the Joseph and Lydia home.
Yes, no worries.
So on that note, just to do due diligence in terms of representation and stuff, I just want to make sure that there's not anybody missing who was in this home, since it's a farm, whether it was servants or workers or any associated names like that, because there's efforts to revise nominations, but we don't want to have to do that to something like this if there's some people associated with this property that might still want to mention that weren't associated with the main family.
Yeah, so Leah, we can do that. We can see if there's any indication. I do imagine that because it's such a small scale farm, there may not be. But we can certainly check, and I can just kind of send a notice, just a, heads up. We did do some digging to see if we had anything within an agricultural survey, if there were any indications either through the census or something.
There's
But
some
if there's
church records
yeah.
to look at to see if there were, enslaved peoples or formerly enslaved peoples baptized associated with this family, just to do due diligence on
Yeah,
that.
we could do that, sure.
I don't think there are, though. This was really a simple farm, typical of Killingworth.
I know Killingworth had a lot of enslaved people, not a lot, but they had a decent number still.
Yeah, that would be more in Clinton. Clinton and Killingworth were originally the same town. And the northern part split off as Killingworth. And they were almost all farmers in North Killingworth.
Tom, I really appreciate the map that you gave. There's a lot of detail in it. You got a lot of those historic features. And as the landscape architect, I really enjoyed looking at it and scrutinizing it and wonder how you created it. I'm always curious as to how accurate it is, but regardless, you've got a lot of detail on there. Again, providing the next researcher, investigator, some base information as to where features might be, so that go look at it.
Tom, I went out there, and I can confirm it is very accurate. And to Marguerite's point, I really just want to thank Tom, because this is all his work, and he really presented a great nomination. And it's really appreciative.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say that I'm putting the whole farmstead in this application, and I intend to put it all under a conservation easement, because I don't want to have an old house there surrounded by a subdivision. That happens a lot. Also, Catherine Labedia came out and looked at archaeological features. So we're going to put that in the conservation easement as well, to protect the architectural resources.
Great. Each of those little features adds so much to the essence and sense of place to a historic landscape. And when you start to pull those out, it really changes its character.
Yes, yeah. Marina wrote an article in Preservation Connecticut about the importance of preserving landscapes. And that kind of influenced me.
Great. Leah, is your hand still up, or do you have another question?
No, sorry.
No, that's okay. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments? Great. Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote to approve the nomination. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Via Ducier?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
And Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Tom, I need to interrupt. I have to get going, to hop off, get to another meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Take care, everybody.
Next item on the agenda is 6B2. The Historic Preservation Council votes to list the William and Marie Comstock House located at 104 Wilcox Avenue, Meriden, to the State Register of Historic Places. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
Also moved.
And second?
Marguerite.
Thank you.
Thank you. And hello again, members of the council. Staff recommends approval of listing of the William and Marie Comstock House located at 104 Wilcox Avenue, Meriden, under Criterion 1 at the local level in the area of community development as part of an upper middle class development sprung from Meriden's robust manufacturing facilities, and under Criterion 2 at the local level as an intact example of the Queen Anne style. Alterations have been minimal, limited primarily to kitchen and bathrooms. The house retains its integrity of location, design, materials, workmanship feeling, and association of a spacious single-family home designed in a popular architectural style within a neighborhood of similar structures. Jordan Sorensen, author of the nomination, is here to help answer questions, as is Demetria McKenzie, the owner. And Demetria, I don't know if your husband is also here. I know he was seeing if he could stay to get on.
Yeah, I think he went to work, so I'll do my best to assist Jordan, who my hat goes off to. You guys really did the work because I was really confused. So.
All right. Any questions or comments from council members?
Tom, I'll just add that this is on a street that's the only local historic district in the city of Meriden, which unfortunately was not put on the state register right after they created it back in the early 1980s. So I'm very happy to see somebody going through the process to get it individually listed.
Yeah, and I will say, Paul, that this street in particular, because we have such great integrity, we originally wanted to consider it as a district, but we also felt that, you know, Demetria was really enthusiastic about listing their home. So we're going to start by listing this one, and then we're going to see if we can have a community meeting to see if the street is interested in being listed on the state register.
That's great. We'll help facilitate that if you'd like through the Historical Society.
Well, thanks, Paul. That would be appreciated.
Anyone else, council members?
I just wanted to say that it was the write-up of the history, the contextual history of the area was really fascinating and very well done. So great job, Jordan. I spotted one tiny little potential typo under criterion number 2, architecture on page 13. I think that it says the Spencer House. I think that might be a typo. The second, right in the first paragraph under there.
Okay. Thanks, Beth.
Yep.
Anyone else?
I'll second Beth's comments. Nice job, Jordan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll third that. Nice job, Jordan.
All right, hearing no more questions or comments, we'll take a roll call vote to approve the nomination. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Via Ducier?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
And Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Nominations.
Thank you, guys. Congratulations, Demetria.
Thank you. Can I just say again, I moved into that house December 2020. We were excited because it was a single family house. A lot of the houses that are that big, they're chopped up into multis. So in the neighborhood, you could tell there's something about it. And then I got this brochure on my door from someone. It said WANA, I guess that's the Wilcox Avenue Association. And so I started digging more, and there are people in the street who are so helpful, who have so much history, who years ago, this neighborhood had so many things happening, but they've gotten older, a lot of the folks, but they're eager to do something. It's a beautiful neighborhood. The homes are amazing. And a lot of them have kept up with that charm. So I'm excited to kind of be a part of it and support the neighborhood.
Great. Have fun.
Thank
you. Come back for some more funding.
Yeah. All right, next item on the agenda is number 9, threatened properties, with a SEPA update from Todd Levine.
Hey everyone, but V, nice to meet you. I went to school in Savannah, so we can chat about Savannah architecture if you want sometime.
Sounds good.
The only update I have is that we have a SEPA case coming up either October or November. The demolition delay runs out November 22nd. So if I could pull it off for October, I will. If not, it'll be in November. We'll know in a couple of weeks staff is going out to visit the site on Monday. By the end of next week, I'll know if it's going to be October or November.
Great, Todd. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 11, report on State Historic Preservation Office. Jonathan Kinney.
Good morning, everyone. A couple things for you today. Again, I just want to congratulate and welcome Vi on her appointment, and also Andy. Thank you for joining us today. We are looking forward to working with you both. I have a couple of events I just wanted to share with everyone, and I can follow up with an email with specific information on each of these. On Friday, September 23rd, there is currently an Olmsted related event being planned with Connecticut ASLA at Wickham Park in Manchester. Jenny Schofield is working out the details of that event, but it will include ASLA credits for anyone who's interested. 2 landscape architects and historians who worked on the large Olmsted survey for us recently will be the presenters, and that'll be a lecture followed by a tour of the park. On October 1st, we're having a really fun Saturday in the Park event. Let me pull up the flyer and I can give you some details on that. It is October 1st. At Lewis Fulton Memorial Park in Waterbury from 12 to 4. And that is going to be Preservation Connecticut, the SHPO, and the City of Waterbury hosting a celebration of the Olmsted landscape heritage in Connecticut. And that will include tours and exhibits and family activities for kids, food trucks, and I will send out that information to the group as well. I hope you can all make it. We'd love to see you there. And then finally, on October 8th is the annual archaeology fair, and that is from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Old Newgate Prison in Coppermine. That is also a family-friendly event with exhibits, games, and speakers, and it is free and open to the public. There is a special fee that day if you want to go into the mine specifically, because they're having a special Halloween event. But we would encourage everyone to attend that and certainly spread the word. And again, I will send an email out to the group following the meeting. Quickly, I just wanted to remind you that we are going to be testing out our hybrid meeting technology next week for the State Review Board, and I will report back to the group in October and let you know how that goes if HPC does want to pursue that. And then finally, I just wanted to let you know that Liz is currently on vacation and she will provide a full museum update in October for everyone. Thank you.
Jonathan, quick question for you.
Yeah.
Several months ago, there was discussion about an assessment of the structural timbers in the mine at Old Newgate.
Okay.
Do you have any news or information? And I'm just curious for personal reasons.
Yeah, I
don't
off the top of my head, Tom, but I can certainly look into that and find out for you.
Okay. So Liz not here. Next item on the agenda is liaison with public and private agencies. Jane Montanaro.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Hi, Jane.
I basically was going to give a similar report to Jonathan, reminder of the events coming up in September and October around Olmsted. But the ASLA event, they are also presenting SHPO and Preservation Connecticut with an award for the Olmsted survey. So that's part of that event. So we're very pleased and proud to be receiving that. And again, October 1st, join us at Fulton Park for our celebration of the survey. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jonathan, do you know if there's anybody here for the Connecticut Preservation Alliance?
I do not know, but I don't see anyone.
Okay.
Presently, no.
All right. So the last 2 items on the agenda is to remind everybody our next meeting is Wednesday, October 5th, 2022 at 9:30 a.m. And before I ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting, Deborah, would you please send out an updated contact list for council members and staff, especially so V has everybody's information?
Yes.
Thank you. And then may I have a motion then to adjourn today's meeting?
Nobody wants to leave.
You guys never cease to amaze me.
Oh, one more thing. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
One more thing. So I have this book which I actually enjoy reading it. It's called How Buildings Learn. It's a book about historic preservations and buildings. If you guys have any books that you would like to recommend, please let me know. I love reading up on these books, and I'll send this also to the team if you guys want to read it. It's actually
I have a lot. I assign that to my students every year.
Isn't that nice, right?
Yeah.
I like it. So yeah, if you guys come across any book that you like, please share with me. I'm finished now.
No, that's fine. That's perfect. Okay, so a motion to adjourn
Marguerite, so moved.
and a second.
I'll second Paul. Give it to Leah.
All right. So second from Leah. All right. Thank you, everybody. It was a long meeting. Appreciate the
Thanks,
input.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you next month.